Hey all, Alex here, and you're home of the Music Deep Dive, and today it is time for a review of the 1864 novel by Jules Verne, Journey to the Center of the Earth. Okay, so this is the second novel of Jules Verne's that I am reviewing on this channel. This comes immediately after the publication of 5 Weeks in a Balloon. I believe this is the third novel in the Extraordinary Voyages series of novels by Verne. And it's interesting because 5 Weeks in a Balloon is not an obscure novel per se. If you go on websites like Goodreads or what have you, it's still one of the most rated Verne novels on here. But Journey to the Center of the Earth is probably the first Verne novel that really to this day exists in the public consciousness still. It has inspired a number of different adaptations in film and things like that. And overall, it's still kind of one of those books that pops up very frequently in like high school curriculums and lists of some of the most important science fiction novels of all time and that sort of thing. So we're dealing with a novel here that does have a history and a reputation surrounding it. So what interested me, because I had not read this novel going in, is that in many ways, Journey to the Center of the Earth follows a lot of the same kind of story points as 5 Weeks in a Balloon. It actually feels very, very cut from the same cloth. The premise is still very much, multiple people. It's a group of 3 people who were going on an exploration instead of this, before they were doing a multiple week trip on like a hot air balloon. And in this case, they are doing an underground kind of expedition hoping to find the center of the earth, essentially. And like in 5 Weeks in a Balloon, you kind of have these 2 central characters who are playing off of each other. In this case, the character of Professor Otto, and then the character of Axel, the professor's nephew. And they're kind of the intellects. They're bouncing off of each other. And then you have the kind of third wheel, which in this case is this very kind of silent, mostly very powerful but sedate Icelandic guy named Hans. And he's kind of not the foil. He doesn't play as active of a role as the same foil does in 5 Weeks in a Balloon, but he's still very much kind of the third person in that group. So you're really sort of jumping into things with the same premise. And what I'll say about Journey to the Center of the Earth is maybe for about the first half or so, I didn't necessarily see the major uptick in quality that I was anticipating going in. I felt like I had a lot of kind of the same qualms, the same frustrations, I suppose, as I did with 5 Weeks in a Balloon, in the sense that it was very episodic. It felt like consistently the characters were getting into scraps that no one was ever really concerned they were going to actually die. Like, oh, they ran out of water at one point. And of course they end up finding this like underground reservoir that saves their asses in the last minute. So it's a lot of twists like that again, maybe like the modern brain, the modern consciousness has learned to anticipate because we've been more exposed to these types of stories over the years. But it comes across quite predictable. Now, the difference with Journey to the Center of the Earth, and the reason why I do think this is a major success compared to 5 Weeks in a Balloon, is the second half, or maybe more so like the last third of the novel, really picks up the pace. Like once it gets to the point where they start interacting with creatures down at the center of the earth, I think I probably shouldn't say a whole lot more, but it gets into this very kind of different idea of how human evolution came to be, how humans came to be in general. And there are several like interactions with creatures down there and sticky situations where all of a sudden like the tension is picked up and the pacing is picked up. And you're left in sort of like a maelstrom from a story standpoint, because you are not necessarily, again, I think you still have that underlying assumption that somehow everything will work out. They've been granted enough mulligans at this point that it feels like they'll definitely be granted one more at the end. But it does intrigue you how it's going to happen. It does kind of sweep you into the narrative. And I don't think it's necessarily because of the characters. I actually think for the most part, these characters are fairly blank slates. The professor is kind of a generic asshole who's very engrossed in his work and very kind of subsumed by that and becomes very kind of authoritarian at points as a result. But for the most part, everyone else is kind of, again, fairly neutral. Wouldn't say there's strong character development in this novel necessarily, but it really is the situations that they're put into where you really get to see Verne's creativity and how he incorporates his own research into biology and prehistory and geology and various subjects like that. You really get to see that come through here. And for as fantastical as it might be and for as absurd as it might be, it definitely works and it engrosses you. Now, the other thing too is, and this might be in some ways credit to the translation, which is a 2009 translation by Frank Wynne. That's what I read here. It might be credit to the translation, but it really is striking how eminently readable these Verne novels are in this day and age. Now, some of that might be because I, in this project, have read, at this point, close to hundreds of classic novels, these kind of arcane works of literature. So maybe I have a higher tolerance for this sort of thing than I once did and that other people might. But to me, reading a Jules Verne novel after reading even some of these other 19th century novels, whether they're in the original English, like the Charles Dickens novels, or whether they're other translations like Flaubert's Madame Bovary, for instance, like reading Verne compared to those novels is almost to me like comparing reading a young adult fiction novel to a Jules Verne novel. I mean, the prose here is really accessible. It's really fairly written. It's well done. And it's no surprise that this works in a high school context, because I think pretty much any high schooler, even in this day and age when we talk all the time about struggles with reading comprehension being at an all-time high for high schoolers and all that sort of thing, I think even a contemporary high schooler could probably get through this without too much issue. It's pretty damn accessible. And in that sense, I think it does work as kind of a gateway, too, for people who are curious about what the appeal for Verne is. Now, over time, of course, we'll look at some other novels. We'll kind of get a sense of like how representative of his best work is Journey to the Center of the Earth. Compared to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, from when I read that years ago, I would say that this novel is simplified, perhaps, not necessarily digging into as many moral and ethical things, not necessarily diving you headfirst into the depths of what Verne would do. It still feels like he has growth to do as an author, but I still really like it. I do think the second half of this one saves it. And I think for someone who is looking to get into Verne's work, I think this is a very fair, very breezy way to get into it. The translation I had, it's like a little over 200 pages. It's not that bad. Pretty easy to get through. So check it out. Again, not among my absolute favorite novels of the 19th century so far, but it has its charm. And again, I think the ending and kind of the latter piece of it is genuinely a pretty fun thrill. So worth checking out. Journey to the Center of the Earth. Really good to great novel. With that, I want to say thank you all so much for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. As always, more reviews are to come. Make sure to hit that bell for notifications and tell a friend as well. Thanks a lot. And I'll see you next time right here at your home of the Music Deep Dive.